Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my Veterans to Success podcast. You probably know by now, my mission is to help 1 million veterans and entrepreneur business owners achieve the dreams, goals, and aspirations they deserve. That is why I created the Veterans to Success podcast, because I get to interview guys, men and women, who want to share their fascinating stories with you about their time before, during and after their time in the military, so you can benefit and overcome your challenges. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be mesmerized, astounded, and entertained. Hello and welcome to another episode of Veterans to Success, the podcast where I get to speak to seemingly ordinary people with extraordinary stories. And today I've got Sean Welsh from across the pond with me today. Hello, Shawn. How are you doing?
Great, Joe. How are you doing today?
I'm absolutely fantastic and all the better for seeing you. How are you doing?
It has been a wonderful day here. Beautiful outside. You can't complain. Can't complain at all.
That's fabulous. Great. So, you know the score, there's no big fanfare for the common man or the common woman. We just dive straight in and we go back to when you were a young boy, because the purpose of this, as you know, is to get a feel for where you are, feel for what you did in the military, and then how you transitioned and a few other stuff, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Fantastic. So let's dive straight in then, and let's go. Tell me about your time way before the military, and as a young boy, what were you up to?
So I was actually raised as a military child. My father was career Navy, so grew up around the military. He was a pilot with the Navy, and so got to go to different places, different bases, things like that. For the most part, stateside. I was born in Puerto Rico at the Navy base there. That's where he was stationed directly out of commissioning. But so growing up, I mean, it was what I would call almost normal, because my kids pretty much experience the same thing. You get to move around every couple of years. You get to make new friends all the time. I wish we would have had social media back then. I'd still be in touch with some of those people I grew up with and met in the various places we lived. But it was what I would call a somewhat normal childhood, aside from the fact of being a military family where we had to move every couple of years. It was my parents are still married and, still doing well.
Fabulous. And you know what, we've got, we class that in the UK, right? Because obviously you have a pad, i.e. a place where you live. So we call it a pad's brat, right? So someone who's a child of a couple who's in the military who have a pad, they're pad's brats. And so respectfully, you would have been classed as a pad's brat in the UK forces. So, I'm always interested because I wasn't from a military background or a military family, someone who served in that. How did that work out for you in your schooling? I mean, did you say it was a standard ordinary life because all of your peer group were doing the same sort of stuff, like moving every 2-3 years? How did that impact on your education? And what about any siblings, brothers, sisters? Did you have any brothers, sisters?
So there's another similarity there that you pointed out. Here in the U.S., we call it military brats for the kids growing up in military families. So
right.
I did have a younger brother and a younger sister. And yes, we moved, but at the same time, my dad was in specific programs that actually afforded him the opportunity to stay at the same base. So I went to elementary school, moved away, came back, and I went to high school with the same kids I went to elementary school with. So that was very weird for a military kid to actually come back and go to school with the same kids he had gone to school with. So that was kind of neat to be able to make friends and renew friendships in that sense. Now, granted, there's a couple of years, that you grow in between that you have to sort of feel each other out and see if you're still friends, but all in all,
Yeah,
it all worked out. And,
yeah,
the best part, I mean, it's not an easy life being a military child, because you don't understand what's going on, right? You don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
why you have to move and leave all your friends. But the one thing that I learned later in life was you're able to go into any room and talk to people. You're able to make friends anywhere because you're used to it. You had to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you didn't, then it was just you and your siblings playing together, and usually that winds up in a fight. So, you have to, go find new friends so you can get away from the younger brother and sister and have fun that way.
And that's interesting, you see, because what I've discovered in life generally, right? Everything that happens outside of us and humans happens to everyone. It's how you interpret it, isn't it? Because it's like you said the words along the lines that it was good because it taught you how to effectively network, how to get on with others. Somebody in exactly the same circumstances might say, "Oh yeah, well no wonder I wasn't a success because I kept moving around and I always kept meeting people. I never felt comfortable." So I think that you were building resilience at a young age, then, weren't you? Really?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you don't realize it at the time, right? And even now, having retired myself from the military, I kind of wish that I would have had that lifelong friend, that I grew up with, and we did all those stupid things as teenagers and all that, and I just don't have that.
Yeah.
Um, but you also realize that the things that I've been able to do, the people I've been able to meet, the places I've been able to travel to, I mean, it's been an amazing journey, and all in all, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Good. So, what was it in during your childhood, uh, and probably influenced by your parents' lifestyle and the lifestyle you had? When did you wake up and just think military seems like a good place to go?
For me, it was 9/11, when the World Trade Centers were hit. I had already gone and graduated college. I was actually 28 when I joined the military.
28.
Yeah, 28, yes. My parents never pushed the military, and I had nothing against the military. I was going to pursue a different path. But 9/11 happened and realized that I should probably do something a little bit more important. And so I joined the military, and 20 years later, here I am.
Well, how did that impact on you, right? Because at 28, I left. I got out the military, the regular army. Then I joined the reservists a few years later. But I left at 26, 27. So I'd already done my stint, right? By the time that you were just thinking about joining up, and 9/11 was a travesty. I mean,
Right.
that just shocked the world. And I think I've spoken to a few guys who served in the US, and I think it impacted you guys a lot because like we in the UK we've been used to Northern Ireland and stuff, the Falklands and everything. And I suppose in America it was not that you weren't aware of stuff, but it maybe didn't impact. But that 9/11 day, that was a big change point, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, it essentially was our generation's Pearl Harbor. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
because if you look at the makeup of the United States, we're not a country that's easy to invade because we got two large oceans on either side. So
yeah.
when something happens on soil, it gets their attention.
Mm,
So for me, it was one of those things that I felt like I had a duty.
yeah,
Much like I would imagine a lot of the guys after Pearl Harbor decided
yeah,
they had a duty, and
yeah.
so I wound up raising my hand, and 20 years later.
Yeah, and let's take you back to that 20 years, right? So you're 28 years old. You probably sort of set in your ways, right? It was easier to teach me at the age of 18. I was still impressionable. Like 28, you probably learned how to lie in bed and went how to get up and stuff a little bit more because it's indoctrinated. Then all of a sudden you join the military and you've got this drill sergeant or whatever shouting at you or saying, "I'm your mother now," or words to the equivalent. How are you coping with that?
So and I've told this story many times that I believe that a lot of people, at least in the U.S., develop their leadership style, who they are going to be as a leader, around that 25-year range, and even in the
Yeah.
military, that's about the time that you have responsibility as a soldier.
Yeah.
Is about 25 if you join at 18. So going in, I knew who I was, I knew my strengths, my weaknesses, things like that. I was never, a great athlete or anything like that. So, I was not out there, killing it and physical training and stuff like that. But I went in with the mindset, to just try to fit in and do what I got to do, right? Because
Mm.
one, I'm also 6'6", so I was taller than all the drill sergeants and much bigger than most of the drill sergeants. So I knew going in I was a target. And sure enough, the first night, my battle buddy, the one they tagged me up with, starts arguing with the drill sergeant. So next thing you know, him and I are doing push-ups while the drill sergeant's yelling, and he keeps telling the kid next to me to shut up and listen to me because I'm telling him to shut up. So,
I-
because I knew I stood out, so I wasn't trying to
yeah.
become an issue, right? So,
Yeah. And doing push-ups is like an equalizer for whatever height you are, because
yeah.
then you're only the height of your arms, right? So forget the body and all that also. Just get down, give me 10, 20, 30. Right. Okay. So and just out of interest, and this is curiosity for me, did you get like sort of identified as a basketball player?
Well, I get asked that a lot. In fact, when we lived in Korea, a lot of people wanted to take my picture all the time because I guess they thought I was an NBA player or something. But um, it's and I played basketball back in high school, and it's I got it. Some people just ask that question, and I was never big enough or bad enough to think I was like Will Chamberlain, who used to spit
No,
on people and tell them it
the
was
reason,
raining.
yeah, the reason I ask is I was a physical training instructor and I actually was a qualified basketball coach. And if I'd have seen you coming into the gym, I'd have just had a word with you and I said, "Hey, you got to join this team, man, because you can score the baskets for us that easy." Okay, so you've been introduced to the drill sergeant. He's telling you to get down, give you 20, 30, 40, 50. And so what's your military career going like? And what sort of stuff are they putting you through in basic training?
So, with basic training, one, I was older than pretty much everybody else that was in
Mm,
the platoon. And like I said, my goal was to just sort of try to blend in because I knew I already stuck out,
yeah,
and my face you can read like a book. So if I'm frustrated, upset, whatever, you can tell. And I remember one of the drill sergeants when we're doing the marching around and learning how to march, he could tell by my face that I was frustrated because I was in the back of the formation, being the tallest guy.
yeah.
We always have to play catch up with the people because they keep getting out of step. So, I just remember one time when we took a break, him looking at me going, "I know Welsh. I know." And just because you could read it on my face and I was just frustrated. So, but I mean, with Army basic training, you learn, the basic stuff. Like we call it drill and ceremony, the marching and things like that, and the different movements and formations, things you're supposed to do. Of course, we did, rifle marksmanship. You do CBRN training. You get to do the confidence courses and things like that. So it's it breaks you down and builds you back up to a degree, right? And gets you
Yeah.
prepared to be a soldier and move on to your actual career schools. So it was all in all was a good experience for me, especially being older, because I was able to, one, figure out how to blend in a little bit, and two, I was also able to work on just listening and taking everything in and trying to learn. So.
And yeah, and I suppose in some respect you were maybe seen as a father figure by the younger guys in the training party because they'd be looking at you for a bit of wisdom, maybe.
Maybe some, but I honestly I don't know that I even publicized it that much that I was older.
Right. Okay.
And we had some kids that had gone to military school and things like that, so they actually knew a lot more about military side than I did.
Right.
So
Okay.
they probably were really. I remember even asking them questions. So
Oh, good.
it's
Yeah, because you
using your
shared
resources.
a load really.
Yep.
So you went down a particular branch in the military. So tell us about that. What sort of stuff can you talk about which isn't operationally sensitive on your stream of career? What did you get up to?
So I went military intelligence, which is a very interesting career, right?
Yeah.
There's all different types of things you can do with inside military intelligence, and I was an analyst. So basically, we call it the hub of the intel wheel, where you take all the different types of intelligence coming in and you put it together in a product and do your analysis and give it to the command teams for their decision making purposes. And with that, you go to all kinds of different units. So I've been in infantry units, armor units, explosive ordnance units, aircraft units. So you get to look at all kinds of different ways to do intelligence as well, which is really neat when you start looking at what impacts what, depending on the type of unit you're in. So did that my entire career, and learned how to work through the analysis piece and try to figure out what the enemy is doing, and how the message needs to be conveyed to the commander to help with the decision making process and things like that. So very rewarding.
And what was most interesting and rewarding about it? And what was it, one of those moments where you thought, yeah, I got this?
So the first thing that always sticks out with me is I was in an Apache unit, the Apache
Yeah,
aircraft
yeah, Apache.
helicopter. Yeah.
Oh,
And
brilliant helicopter, yeah.
yes. And those pilots, a lot of them just wanted to know where small arms fire was happening so they could go shoot bad guys. That was their thing. But when I was
And
in,
I'll tell you what, if I just interject, if I know I've got an Apache on my back, I know like it's pretty much index, because yeah, they're so advanced.
oh, it's a phenomenal aircraft, phenomenal. Um, the most interesting for me was probably the explosive ordnance. Um, One, the amount of respect I have for those guys, because they can't make a mistake. If they
No.
make a mistake, it's the end in many cases. And I think there's where I really developed as an intel professional, and being able to train my guys to do things a certain way, and make it so that it was value added to the EOD community.
Yeah.
And we got to go to some training and stuff like that. And we got to see things firsthand. So all in all, I think my total experience with the EOD guys was probably the most rewarding of my career.
Well, yeah, well, thank you for that, because I remember when I served with EOD and we had Sandy. Unfortunately, he's passed now, he's passed away. But he was like the Wikipedia, the encyclopedia of everything. And if we got on a task and we didn't recognize something, we'd just send a signal and say, look, we got this. We'd send photographs. It was photographs back then. It wasn't digital or anything. We'd be faxing stuff, and well, real prehistoric compared to what they do now. But he'd be saying, yeah, okay, yeah, it's this and this, and you want to look at that. And he was just a mine of information. So like what you guys are doing intelligence, that's like life-saving stuff, because we might not have seen something before. We want to know exactly what it is we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing, is I learned probably as much from them as I was able to help them, because they know so much about their field and what they do, that it amazes me when I run across people, especially support people. Like as an intel person, we're considered a support person, that think they know all the answers instead of going to the experts. And so that was one of those things that I loved working hand in hand with the UD guys.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the Apache helicopter, and then I did interject. What was that you were going to say? Because it brought a smile to your face, and I just want you to capture that moment again. You said, I remember one time.
It's just the fact that every time I'd come in the morning, or for the night, I worked night shift then. So every time I came in the evening, that the shift coming on, the pilots would always just want to know about, where the enemy was,
Ah,
So
right, okay, got you. Yeah, so they could take them out, right? Got you.
Yep.
And so you did quite a few tours. As you say, you went to Korea. What was that like in the Republic of Korea in Camp Humphreys?
We loved Korea. I was able to take the whole family, so we actually stayed there 5 years. Um, got to see a lot of the country, which was phenomenal, and we were able to really get engulfed in the community. I did a lot of things when I first got there. I was part of the garrison, which is kind of like they're the ones who run the base. So I was doing a lot of interaction with Korean nationals. So it was very fascinating to meet, and figure out how the Korean culture really worked. So really getting into that, and my kids were able to go to a couple of like summer camps and things like that that dealt specifically with the Korean culture. And for all in all, I think it was a great experience. And, even my kids were learning a little bit of Hangul in school, which was pretty neat.
Yeah, and they were a welcoming of the Americans in Korea, and everything was great.
Yes, for the most part. I mean, while I was over there, Trump was president, so we were having things got a little tense there towards the end with the initial interactions between President Trump and North Korea.
That's
But
right, I
ultimately,
remember.
yeah,
Yeah,
ultimately that all calmed down. Now, I will say that the older generations, I think, are much more. I don't want to say tolerant, but they're much more appreciative of the Americans and what happened, and like we were able to go to the UN memorial and check that out. And a lot of the older Koreans there would always, talk to us as we were visiting. So we take the Boy Scouts down there and do stuff like that. And, so we always had fun like that. Every once in a while we'd have protests and things outside the base, based on different things, politics, things like that. But for the most part, I mean, Korea was one of those places where you literally could walk around it, and I always felt safe.
oh, that's great. Because I mean, I know on the board I spoke to a guy who was in the infantry and artillery, and he spent a lot of time on the border just on guard. Uh, and it's interesting the music that they play or some stuff the North Koreans. And he was telling me about that, like how to infiltrate or infiltrate the mind, which is all psychological games, which is interesting. And I suppose you would have been analysing and looking at that and monitoring it at times as well, wouldn't you?
If the job I had at the time dealt with that, then absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, we definitely had people that paid attention to all that stuff.
Mm. And so you've had a great time in Korea. You come back to the United States, and you're then uh, Battalion S2 non-commissioned officer in charge. So what is it now where you're thinking, right, what's on the other side?
Uh, I was told early in my career that you would know when it was time to go.
Mm.
And honestly, that happened with me. When I hit about 18 years, a lot of aches and pains, problems with the back, whatever, and just realizing, what, I'm already 10 years older than everybody else. It's time to go.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
time has come,
yeah.
so I started the whole transition process to retire at 20.
Right, okay. And what's because this is interesting for me anyway, about the transition, because we had a chat about what we're going to cover, and transition for different members of the military is completely a different experience, whether it's more difficult for some and easier for others. How was it for you? Because you'd recognize like that all of a sudden you woke up and you thought, yeah, it's time to go. But this was a year or two before you actually got out. So how did you start preparing for that?
So with the U.S. military, you're permitted to start doing the transition assistance program 2 years out from whenever you're separating. Um, a lot of people wait and don't use that full time. In some cases, they're not afforded the opportunity to use that full time. I was fortunate, and one of the reasons I'm a big proponent of starting 2 years out is you can space things out so they don't impact the mission. So you can start spacing things out so that you're not gone the entire time.
Yeah.
So we went through it and decided that we have to do this. And so with the military, we have a program that's mandated you have to attend. And you can start that, like I said, at 2 years out, and you can spread it out. There's anywhere from, I want to say there's 5 mandatory classes and then
Right.
a handful of other classes and things you can take.
Got you.
So I started with that. And for me, I had a buddy who was about 6 months ahead of me in the process of retiring. So I just jumped on his coattails initially because I didn't know what to do. And so I started doing the same things he was doing. And through that, I went to a couple transition programs and I met some people and started paying attention to what was going on and learning that there's a whole lot of resources available. And I wound up doing this one that wasn't affiliated with the military at all. It was just a job search type of program that taught you different ways to look for jobs. And
Yeah.
I built a relationship with these guys. And ultimately, they pushed me to start my podcast, Vet SOS, where we focus on the military transition space. So about 6 months into my transition, we start the podcast. And next thing you know, I'm hearing from all these people all these horror stories about their transition. And so just sitting there listening and taking it all in, I was able to avoid a lot of pitfalls. And so
Yeah.
ultimately, I had a very good transition. And the other thing that I did that I highly recommend anybody do, regardless of, whether you're in England or you're in the United States, is keep those lines of communication open with your family. My wife and I sat down and had a long talk when I decided it was time to retire, and told her, I have 2 years to get ready. I need some leniency here to do the things I need to do to try to get ready to retire so we can be successful after the military. And there are times that she wasn't happy,
Yeah.
but all in all, she was there in my corner, and we did it together, and I kept her in the loop, and I was able to be very aggressive and go after the different things I wanted to do during my transition, and it worked out very well for us.
And that's an interesting point because I think, and it's like any military exercise really. The more planning and preparation you do, then the better it's going to turn out because you've actually structured it. And I'm sure you'll agree, right? In basic training, right? They beat the civilian out of you or train it out of you, if you like, and then and then they build you up as a soldier, sailor, airman, or a woman, and then you're in, and then it's all about culture, indoctrination, if you like. And then at the end, if you do not go and use that training for transition training, and you want to fit it in the last couple of weeks, then they're not going to be able to take the military out of you to build you up as a civilian. So the more you start to do that, the better, because I was actually DJing and doing door work about 2 years before I got out. So while I was still in the military, I was getting used to how civilians behave, which is a little bit different. So that you'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
Oh, wholeheartedly. We often joke that, basic training is 9 to 12 weeks, depending on your service,
Yeah.
and, so they take that long to turn you into a soldier. And then you got 5 days essentially to become a civilian again, because the 5 classes you got to take are each, it takes about 5 days. So, there's so many resources we have available to us here that it's important that people start early and they start, getting out there and learning what's available, because, doing the program that's mandated is really just that minimum standard. There's so much more that'll help you, and, I encourage everybody to be aggressive.
Yeah, definitely. And I do recognize that you guys are advanced of us in the way that you treat your military and veterans the guys who are getting out, help them prepare better than here. I think we're improving, but when I look back at the 80s when I was in, you were more advanced. And I always remember I went across to the States on a tour. I think it was Fort Lewis, and we were working with Rangers, and because we were engineers, and I met a guy, a Vietnam veteran, and the way that Vietnam veterans were treated initially was quite terrible, right? And he was telling me, and what he said was, you want to watch the film Platoon. It was just out back in the 80s. He said that's how Vietnam was. And I always remember that. And I think that's probably why you've developed into helping your guys who get out and so much respect for veterans now. And I think that after Afghanistan and the stuff that's happened now, I think that people are changing with the way that they treat the military or ex-military. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The way the Vietnam veterans were treated is unacceptable. First of all, because this was people who were called by their country to go serve. A lot of them didn't volunteer to go specifically for Vietnam. But the fact that they were shunned when they came back is atrocity. And I'm glad to see that we even have transition programs now that are open to all eras of service. So people from then can still get help if they need help, and that's important. It's not just the 9/11 veterans, if you will. We need to take care of all of our veterans, and every country should be taking care of their veterans, because that's a group of people that literally is willing to die for their country. And if they're willing to do that, they make that commitment, you owe it to them to take care of them and make sure that they are prepared for everything they need to do.
Yeah, because that's the ultimate sacrifice, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got the ear of your wife and your family, and they recognize that you want to get out, and you go on a journey where you really want to help and get the news out there for guys who've been in the military, don't you? And let them tell their story. I noticed you were with a network on the 5 Minute Salute. That was your first venture, wasn't it, into media?
So I already had the podcast at that point.
Yeah.
And then I was invited to a local TV show to do this 5 Minute Salute. So I went and I did it. And ultimately, since I was moving to this area, they asked me if I was interested in maybe hosting a show. And so for about 3 months, I ran the 5 Minute Salute, where we brought in people who were veterans talking about, their entrepreneurial journey, things they've done as far as that's concerned. And it was great to meet people in the local area and help tell that story, get that story out. Because veteran stories are, if you haven't heard them, you're missing out, because they're amazing. What we've been able to accomplish, what we've gone through, and what we want to do.
And what did you find the fundamental driving force that was common with all of the guys that you were interviewing?
A lot of them referred back to their military service as laying that groundwork, where after military service, they weren't scared to go start a business. Like they had achieved so much through the service. They had learned, they had grown as a person, and if the drill sergeant didn't scare them, starting a business isn't going to scare them, type of deal. So it's having that grit and that tenacity that the military helps build in you.
And I'm sure that it wasn't a bed of roses for you when leaving the military, even though sometimes being military, ex-military, we sugarcoat stuff because we forget the bad times a lot of the time. So, what was particularly challenging that you can recall when transitioning from the military, like when the gate closes behind you, so to speak, and you think, wow, that's it.
So after 20 years, it was very surreal the day I got, we call it a DD 214. That's the form you get when you leave the military that outlines your entire military service. And so basically they came in, they handed me my DD 214, they handed me a flag and said, thanks. And that was it. Like, I was just like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
We have retirement services and things like that you can go through as well. But the whole thing was kind of surreal. Like, not that you were expecting a parade, but like, it was just like, hey, have a good day. And, it's like, all right. And so you leave, and the the thing that we see here that impacts people the most is that sense of belonging.
Yeah,
When you leave the service, you everybody looked the same, everybody was talking the same language, everybody was dressed the same, so you knew who you were in that environment. And now you're going out into the world and you're not that, I mean, you're still that same person, but you're not looking the same. You're not necessarily
yeah,
talking the same. And so that sense of community, and unfortunately, too often people isolate themselves, and that's what's led to um, our problem here with veteran suicide. And,
yeah.
and we're for years it was 22 a day, but reality now with research is saying that it's probably double that, if not more. So
Mm,
we might be losing 44 veterans a day to suicide because of all kinds of things, whether that's PTSD or just losing that sense of belonging, not knowing where they fit in, what they're supposed to do,
yeah.
and reaching that level of hopelessness.
Yeah, and I know, for instance, like the Falklands, we have lost since that time many, many more lives, veterans' lives, through suicide, sense of loss, sense of not belonging, or just PTSD and stuff. So yeah, it's the same, not as on a bigger scale as in the US. It's still proportionately though, it's the same, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So then you become, when did you want or when did you recognize that you wanted to help more in the area of veterans and stuff?
So funny enough, when I was deciding to leave the military and all that, I figured I was going to leave the military, and the most you would see me involved with the military was, going on base to the commissary or something, or the class six to buy some liquor. Didn't really have any plans to really get involved. And through the building of this podcast, um, it just became a huge blessing. And before I knew it, I was in the middle of this, what we call the transition space. And um, we have over 100 episodes out. I've talked to tons of people that are just amazing, doing amazing
Mm,
things for people. And so we're trying to educate them about all these resources that are available. And I'm booked out through the end of the year. I got a waiting list for next year, and through this whole process, I have been blessed through the stories I've been able to hear, through the people I've been able to meet, and how they help my transition. And it just became one of those things where I started really wanting to give back and find ways to give back, whether that is through the podcast, through volunteering with other veteran support organizations, and possibly, or not possibly, but in the future here, starting our own nonprofit to help veterans.
yeah, and I that's one of the reasons I set up this podcast, because I share your mission to do that. And it's also great when, as soon as I connect with someone, and it only takes the first few sentences, and then you just know, right? Okay, yeah, because we're comrades, comrade in arms, and it's just great how we can open up and speak openly to each other. So with, because obviously in life you get challenges and failures. What's the biggie for you that constantly drives you, and on how to deal with failure?
Say that again.
How do you deal with failure? When something slaps you in the face and you think, wow, that hurt. What's your recourse that just thinks,
Well, it used to be to drink, but
right, okay.
uh,
And how did
not.
how did that affect you?
It never worked out well. The answer is never at the bottom of the bottle. I'll tell you that much.
No.
Um, it, I've learned over the years, and there's a lot of books on it now about failing forward and learning from failure, growing out of failure, and I buy into that. I
Mm,
really believe there is so much we can learn in failure that we can't be scared of failing.
mm,
There's the I would rather fail at something than live with regret that I never even tried.
mm,
And
yeah.
so, taking that time, and especially we're not talking about life or death, right? Um, obviously failing a military operation is a whole different story. But trying a new business or trying something off of your business and failing at that is not the end of the world. You sit down, you analyze it, you learn from it, you grow, and you try again. And so I've really tried to adapt that mentality. And yeah, failing sucks when it happens. It's never easy to just deal with it, but when you step back from it and actually, okay, what happened, and analyze it and figure it out, I believe there's so much we can learn and grow from in failure.
Yeah, and I've said it before, say it again. Just because you're it's a failure in one area, it doesn't mean to say you failed if you're going to get up and you do it again. And you maybe do it differently. So, and then it's test and adjust, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and you can put it in any perspective you want to put it in, right? So you can talk about the greatest athlete in whatever sport. How many times do they actually fail? But you don't remember those. You remember all.
Right. Yes, so exactly, and the athletes that fail and maybe don't do what they thought they could. And I watched, there's a video, I forget the name of it, but it's 0.45 seconds. And that is the difference between 5 sports, Olympic sports, and the first and second people, if that makes sense.
We saw a lot of that this year in the Summer Olympics. There
Yeah.
was a lot of scores that were tenths of seconds apart.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've had an Olympic that was this close in so many sports.
I know, and the thing is, the amount it's just on the day, and I think that happens in life, and the Olympics and sport generally is just like a microcosm of life generally, and talking of which, success. What does success look like to you, and what's the secret of your success so far, even though you may not have reached the pinnacle of what you want to do yet? Because if you're anything like me, you're always looking for the next challenge, the next success, and your target. Well, from what you've done so far, what do you think the secret of your success is?
The number one thing, and I'm sure some would argue, is a willingness to learn. I've not always been the easiest person to get along with. I'm not never been the easiest person to have as an employee or as a boss. Um, I have a very strong uh, personality, and there's the way I want things to happen. And but I've learned over the years that you have to listen. You have to build a good team around you. You have to harness, their abilities to make the entire team successful. And recently, last couple of years, I've heard some great analogies, and one of them being that you want to train them to leave, but treat them well enough to stay. And
Yeah,
to me, that's phenomenal. You want to give them everything to make them a huge success. And if they do leave, you want to celebrate their success in that way too, because, it's not about you. It's about helping others. And I think it was JFK, John F. Kennedy, that had said, rising tide raises all boats,
yeah,
and, it's when we help each other, we all get better. And so over the years, I believe I've become a lot less selfish, and tried to give back where I can give back, and really appreciate the blessings that I've had and do have. And you know, for me, I mean, you can measure success in many different ways, I guess. One, I have a nice house and I'm providing for my family. That to me is a success. I have, one kid in high school and one in college. To me, that's a success.
yeah, yeah.
And I've been married to the same woman, the only woman for, 20 plus years now. That's a success, especially
Yeah,
in today's day,
it certainly is.
uh,
Yeah,
um, so you can, depending on how you want to measure that, but for me, um, the fact that I try to make the time to give back where I can, and I try to make an impact and help people. Those are the types of successes I'm trying to measure at this point.
that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. And we've touched on and maybe not identified it in a significant way. Uh, Coaching and mentoring, right? Because I know there would have been people giving you a kick up the bum or a hand, an arm around the shoulder at various times. How important do you think having a good coach and mentor has been during your life and military career and now, in fact?
I have a buddy who is popular for saying, find a mentor, find 10. Um, Mentors and coaches are just such an amazing resource. And, I like to look at it as the term board of directors. Another friend of mine had sort of coined that phrase about having a transition board of directors. Um,
Yeah.
and I look at it as all aspects of my life, trying to have a group of people, a board of directors, if you will, for each aspect. So, like, I've been involved with Boy Scouts for a long time here in the U.S., and so I have a handful of leaders with a lot more experience than me that are part of my board of directors. So when I have a question or I need some mentorship, I go to them.
Mm.
And then with military transition, I have my group of people that I go to because we continue to transition. It didn't end just because I took off the uniform. So all different aspects of my life, I have boards of directors. There may only
Mm.
be one member on the board right now. Maybe I'm trying to make the board bigger, but I probably have 5 or 6 separate boards of directors for that very reason. Because one, I know I don't know everything, and two, they're going to push me and drive me to reach new levels.
Good. And that brings us also onto the social network and business network, because when we were in the military, right, we had a great social network and we just knew where everyone was. When you left, you recognized that maybe that wasn't there anymore. So what have you been doing to build your network now, and how important do you think it is to have a good network?
I I don't know that I completely buy into the phrase that your network is your net worth.
Mm.
Um, Maybe because I was never a huge social media person. But now that I'm out and I'm trying to do a podcast, I'm trying to build the social media presence. Um, I definitely understand the importance of a network. And I
Mm.
think it's important, especially with tools like LinkedIn. I call it targeting network.
Yeah.
So I will have a specific topic that I'm looking for, and those are the people I try to connect with, whether it be military transition or veterans or education or entrepreneur or whatever the case may be that I'm working on at that time. I will target through LinkedIn using keywords and stuff to find the people that I want to connect with.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And I think that's a good way to build your network, because you're going to connect with the people that are experienced, if not experts, in the field that you're trying to look at. And you can sit there and build a relationship with them once you connect. So it's a big deal to me. I think you just have to be smart about it.
Mm.
I don't need a million followers of people I don't know.
No.
I'd rather have 100 people that I know and trust, than building some ridiculous number of people that really don't even know who I am.
Yeah, and that's how we met. We met on LinkedIn, and if it hadn't been for that, yeah, and I'm totally with you on that. It's not the quantity, it's the quality,
Yeah.
if that makes sense, because the quality matters much more than quantity. And now that you've recognized the transition and the stuff that you learned from, whether it was a drill sergeant shouting at you and recognizing that you were a little bit taller than others, or saying, yeah, I know, when he could see you were frustrated. And then all the way through your military career, and you've learned various stuff. how transferable do you think the skills are that you built up during that time to Civvy Street?
Oh, I think it's huge. Including, the last day of basic training, the drill sergeants are all cool with you now because you're going to
Yeah,
graduate.
yeah.
But they told the whole group, they're like, had this been the old days, we would have taken Welsh in the back and kicked the crap out of him the first day to set an example. I'm like, well, I'm glad it's not the good old days. You
Yeah.
know, it's but I believe you can learn something from everybody, good, bad, or indifferent. You can learn from everybody. And I've had some horrible leaders, and you learn some things you don't ever want to do from those people.
Mm.
But then I've had great leaders, and you learn some things that you definitely want to carry forward and continue to do. And the thing that I challenge anybody to do is every interaction, there's something to be learned from. If you're not doing self-evaluation daily or weekly or monthly to figure out how you could have handled a conversation different, how you could have handled an interaction different, what went well, what didn't go well, those types of things, because you're going to grow out of that. And then figuring out what you can learn from these different people as you go along. If you can do that, it's going to continue to just build and mold who you are. So,
Mm.
my military service doesn't define me, but it's a piece of me. And the different training I had, the different people I interacted with, the deployments and the bonds you build with service members when you're deployed to a combat zone. I don't talk to those guys every day, but those bonds are there, and I know they're there, so I could call them at any given point, and it'll be like we've been talking every day.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's things that you just have to pay attention to what's going on around you and just take it and build from it and make it a part of who you are.
Exactly. Great. So one of the things that I like to cover, and you're giving a lot of great information, and our chat, bouncing ideas off each other, I know will help the listener. What's the one tip? If you could put it into one tip, valuable tip, what would you say to a guy, man or woman, who is still in the military getting out, or someone who's left the military, or even, a civilian who's not been in the military but has a real support for guys in the military? What's the one tip that you would give them to help them just get over stuff?
I would say I have probably a tip for each of those individually. One for all of them. That's difficult. That's difficult. Because the person who's still in, start thinking about transition. I'm not telling you have to get out now, but as soon as you join the military, you should be thinking about your transition. Because if you're, let's say you're an engineer in the military, in the U.S. military, there's certifications you can do before you get out to be a certified engineer in certain things. So why aren't you thinking about those things early in your career and getting those things taken care of well before it's time to get out? That way you already have that taken care of. So start early and always be thinking about the transition and what's next and what you should be doing to prepare for that. For those who are already out, don't isolate. Find your people. And I don't care what country you served, get out and get involved in something because you need that interaction. Whether that's volunteering with an organization, being part of a veteran organization, going to church, whatever that may be, get out and find your tribe and really, get involved in something so that you have that purpose and community still. And for those who have never been in the military and just support the military, reach out, check on your military friends, because we're real good at saying, I'm
Yeah,
fine and leaving it at that.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, of course. I'm a roughy toughy.
yeah,
I can deal with anything. And then
exactly. Check
yeah,
on them, see how they're doing, because anything can trigger feelings and emotions and things like that. When the U.S. did the withdrawal from Afghanistan, I had a lot of people reach out to me, and I reached out to them because a lot of my battle buddies through the years were going through a lot of problems because that brought up a lot of memories.
Yeah.
Um, so things like that, anything can trigger it. I got triggered by a movie I watched. Great movie. I loved it. But then like the next 4 days, I was like in this funk, and like I didn't even go through what those guys had gone through in the movie. It was a war movie from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just, I was in this place for like 4 days.
Yeah.
Um, so you never know. So reach out to your veteran friends and just check on them from time to time. See how they're doing.
Mm.
And that's really what I would recommend to anybody.
Yeah, because there's a lot of films that hit home actually, like The Hurt Locker for EOD guys. I mean, yeah, and yeah, because I remember chatting to a mate of mine who went to Kosovo and Serbia back in the 90s, and he was big guy. The fact was, when he recalled that, it was an interesting get together. Yeah. And yeah, so it is. You should reach out and help. Just ask the questions, and just spend some time. So, what does the future hold for you now? On this side of Civilian Street, and what are you doing?
So I have a regular 9 to 5 job, if you will. I work for a construction company here locally, as a safety professional on a job site, and great company. I enjoy what I do. Um, I also have the podcast, which we're continuing to grow and build, and I have a great team behind me, and we're going to continue to build it. Because our goal is to educate the veteran community here in the States on the resources available to them. So we just launched an educational spotlight and an entrepreneurial spotlight to help them learn about college resources available to veterans and to learn about how to become an entrepreneur and all the resources available to veterans there. So we're trying to continue to build and find ways to educate our community in that sense. And then the next step we're looking at is actually starting a nonprofit, off of the podcast, veterans sharing our stories, where we're able to capture every veteran and veteran spouse's transition story. And we want to have it as a sortable database. It captures all possible demographics and psychographics. So you can sort by anything. If you want to see videos by just a certain sex or gender or age or whatever, you could do that. But we also want to capture things like suicidal ideations, depression,
Mm,
alcoholism, drug abuse, PTSD, so that people can see. Well, we're doing it for two reasons. One, I get asked all the time, hey, can I come tell my story? I'd love to have everybody come tell their story, but then I never get to talk to the organization. So this is going to be the avenue that we can have people tell their story. And then
right.
the second piece of that is we continuously hear people say, well, I thought I was the only one going through this. So we want to be able to show them that they're not alone. Others have gone through what you're going through, something similar, and this is how they got through it, or this is how they, made it past it. And so we think it could be a huge impact for the veteran community, and on a grander scale, once we get this launched, we want to look at how can we take this to England? Can we take this to Canada? Can
Yeah.
we take this
Mm.
to Korea, to Australia, to our different partners that we've served with? Because the stories are stories, and the veteran stories are powerful no matter what country you live in,
Mm.
and who knows, maybe we can start making an impact globally for veterans, where change has to happen and the countries start paying attention. So, we're looking at this project, and we're trying to piece it together right now. We're hoping to launch next year.
That's great, and I'm sure we can share ideas in the future,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that'll be fantastic. So, finally, how can people get in touch? Because I mean, you want to reach out across the pond and maybe get people on your podcast and stuff, and to listen. So, how can people get in touch with you, Sean?
So if they want to connect with us at all as it pertains to the podcast, you can go to vetsospodcast.com. You can message us directly through there. The easiest way to connect with me personally is on LinkedIn. Um, I think that the last part of the LinkedIn is Sean Welsh 00. And,
Yeah.
you can just, look me up that way and connect with me that way. I love connecting. I love having meetings because you never know what's going to happen. You and I connected several months ago, and here we are now.
Yeah, and on the podcast together. So that's brilliant. Well, listen, Sean, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for your service to the country. And I've really enjoyed sharing some time together with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe. This has been a blast, and love anytime we can sit down and talk about veteran affairs and things that we can do to help the community.
JoelTeams.com is a resource I have created to fulfill my mission to help 1 million veterans and business entrepreneurs like you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations they deserve. JoelTeams.com is jam-packed full of valuable resources specifically designed to help you on your journey to success. Visit JoelTeams.com now to find out how you can join and start your journey to success immediately. That's JoelTeams.com, JoelTeams, JoelTeams.com. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.